Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through a silent, unseen doorway, a threshold leading not into a bustling city, but into a world deliberately hidden, meticulously veiled from the outside gaze. Imagine, if you will, the soft, cool marble beneath your bare feet, the gentle trickle of a hidden fountain, and the faint, intoxicating scent of jasmine and cypress carried on a breeze that somehow never feels quite real. You're not just listening to a story tonight, you're an unseen guest, wandering through the hushed, opulent corridors of one of history's most enigmatic institutions, the Ottoman Harem. This isn't the harem of sensationalized whispers and Hollywood fantasies, but the actual, lived experience, a place where power, politics, and daily life wove together in a tapestry far more complex than you might imagine. You'll soon discover that surviving an actual night in this place would be an achievement, let alone getting a good night's sleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, let me know where you are in the world and what time it is for you right now. It's always fun to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the very edge of the harem, a term that actually comes from the Arabic word haram, meaning forbidden or sacred. It's a space both sanctified and off limits to all but a select few. Forget any images of wild abandon. This was a highly structured, almost monastic environment in many ways. You're not in a single building, but a sprawling complex of interconnected apartments, courtyards, and bathhouses, all nestled within the grand Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. Think of it as a city within a city, entirely devoted to the private lives of the Sultan and his extensive household. As you drift through this imagined entrance, perhaps a forgotten side door, you notice the silence first. It's not an oppressive silence, but a gentle hush, punctuated only by the distant cooing of doves or the soft rustle of silk as someone passes. The walls around you are thick, designed to muffle the sounds of the bustling city outside, creating an insular world. Every corner you turn reveals intricate tile work, dazzling mosaics, and perhaps a glimpse of a sun-drenched courtyard filled with citrus trees. This wasn't just a living space. It was a carefully curated experience designed to both protect and impress. One of the most profound aspects of the harem was its seclusion. For the women who lived here, it was their entire world. From the moment they entered, often as young girls gifted to the Sultan or captured in conflicts, their connection to the outside world was severed. This wasn't necessarily a punitive measure, though it certainly had that effect. It was about preserving the purity of the Ottoman dynasty, ensuring the legitimacy of heirs, and safeguarding the Sultan's private life from external interference and political machinations. It was a gilded cage, no doubt, but one adorned with incredible luxury and comfort, at least for some. Consider the atmosphere. Imagine the air itself, thick with the scent of rosewater and exotic spices. You pass through archways adorned with delicate calligraphy, perhaps a verse from the Quran or a poem praising beauty. Sunlight streams through stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the polished floors. You might catch the faint echo of laughter from a distant courtyard, or the pluck of a stringent instrument. It's an environment designed for contemplation, for quiet enjoyment, and, paradoxically, for the subtle dance of power. Historians still argue whether the harem was primarily a prison or a haven. For many, especially those who came from humble beginnings, it offered a life of comfort, security, and even influence that would have been unimaginable outside its walls. For others, particularly those of royal lineage from conquered lands, it was indeed a gilded prison, a place where their former status was stripped away, and their futures were entirely dependent on the Sultan's favor. It's a nuanced picture, far from the simple, exploitative narrative often portrayed. One quirky tidbit about the harem's construction is its labyrinthine layout. It wasn't built all at once, but evolved over centuries, with successive sultans adding new wings and apartments. This resulted in a sprawling, somewhat haphazard design that could be incredibly disorienting. Imagine trying to deliver a message or find a particular person in a place where every corridor looks vaguely similar and every door leads to a new, unexpected space. It was a security feature as much as an organic expansion, making unauthorized access or escape virtually impossible. You could genuinely get lost in there for a week and still not see it all. As for the more intimate aspects, Peter Webb, in The Erotic Spirit Through History, touches upon the profound influence of architecture and environment on expressions of sensuality. In the harem, the very design of the space, with its concealed passages, private courtyards, and secluded chambers, fostered a unique dynamic of intimacy and discretion. It wasn't about public displays of affection, but a highly private and ritualized form of connection, often imbued with a sense of sacredness given its ties to the imperial line. The walls themselves seemed to absorb secrets, becoming silent witnesses to generations of private lives. This physical enclosure shaped not just daily routines, but the very nature of human relationships within its bounds. As you continue your ethereal wander, the feeling of enclosure rather than confinement starts to truly settle in. You notice the sheer scale of the harem's architecture. It wasn't just about making a space private, it was about creating a self-contained world. Think of it. Massive stone walls, labyrinthine corridors, and strategically placed courtyards that funneled light and air in specific ways. You're not just walking through rooms, you're moving through a meticulously designed ecosystem. Every archway, every lattice screen, every delicate fountain had a purpose, often multiple purposes: beauty, ventilation, privacy, and yes, security. The courtyards, for instance, were more than just open spaces. Each one, you might observe, has its own unique character. Some are tiny, intimate oases with a single bubbling spring, meant for quiet contemplation or private conversations between confidantes. Others are grander, adorned with colorful mosaics and towering cypress trees, large enough for small gatherings or the children to play under the watchful eyes of their guardians. These open spaces, tucked away from public view, were crucial for the physical and mental well-being of the inhabitants, providing fresh air and a connection to nature that was otherwise restricted. You can almost feel the gentle warmth of the sun on your face, even as you imagine the cool shade offered by a strategically placed portico. Now imagine the sheer number of hidden passages and concealed doors. This wasn't just for dramatic effect in historical novels. It was a practical reality. Some passages allowed servants to move unseen, delivering food or messages without disturbing the more private areas. Others were escape routes, or perhaps more sinisterly, pathways for the Sultan to move discreetly between his various chambers and those of his favorites. Eleanor Herman, in Sex with Kings, often highlights how physical spaces in royal courts were designed to facilitate or hinder access, and the Ottoman Harem was a masterclass in this, creating layers of privacy and accessibility based on rank and favor. You might find a secret staircase leading to a rooftop terrace with views of the Bosphorus, or a narrow, almost invisible door opening into a forgotten library. It's like a really elaborate historical escape room, except you're not trying to get out, just understand its layout. One quirky tidbit about these architectural marvels is the use of listening posts. Some of the larger chambers, particularly those belonging to powerful figures like the Valid Sultan, had small, almost unnoticeable alcoves or hidden passages directly behind ornate screens or fireplaces. These weren't for secret trysts, but for eavesdropping. Imagine being able to subtly hear conversations from an adjacent room, gathering crucial intelligence without ever being seen. It was a low-tech, but incredibly effective form of surveillance, ensuring that even in the most private settings, a certain level of awareness was maintained regarding alliances, whispers, and plots. The materials themselves tell a story. You'll see not just marble, but also intricate wooden lattice work, known as mashrabiyah, used to cover windows. These weren't just decorative, they allowed those inside to look out without being seen, further reinforcing the privacy of the harem. The quality of the materials, from the finest silks draped over doorways to the rich Iznik tiles adorning the walls, speaks volumes about the wealth and aesthetic sensibilities of the Ottoman Empire. You can almost feel the smooth, cool ceramic beneath your fingertips, tracing the delicate floral patterns. Historians still argue whether the complexity of the harem's layout was a deliberate strategy of control or simply the organic growth of centuries of additions. Was every twist and turn a calculated move to reinforce hierarchy and limit movement? Or did it just expand organically as new sultans arrived and added their own preferred spaces? It's likely a bit of both, a fascinating blend of practical necessity and strategic design. The truth, as often in history, is probably somewhere in the bewildering middle. The private chambers themselves, especially those of the Sultan, were the epitome of refined luxury. You might glimpse a divan piled high with silk cushions, perfect for lounging, or low tables laden with delicate porcelain cups for coffee. The lighting would have been soft, filtered through those beautiful stained glass windows, creating an almost dreamlike ambiance. It's here that the most intimate moments unfolded, far from the prying eyes of the court. Michel Foucault, in The History of Sexuality, examines how power structures often dictate the very spaces in which intimacy is permitted or forbidden, and the harem provides a stark illustration of this. The design of these personal spaces, with their layers of privacy, directly informed and controlled the nature of sexual and emotional expression within the imperial household. It ensured that the Sultan's private life remained just that, private, yet subtly regulated by the architecture itself. Think of the sounds, perhaps the soft rustle of heavy brocade curtains, the distant clinking of a water pipe, or the almost imperceptible drip of water in a hidden cistern. Everything was designed to soothe and isolate, to create an atmosphere conducive to both rest and, when desired, pleasure. You're not just observing, you're enveloped by the very essence of this unique, secluded world, a world where every architectural choice spoke volumes without uttering a single word. Moving deeper into this hushed world, your attention is drawn inevitably towards the heart of the harem, the Sultan's private world. This wasn't merely a bedroom, it was a suite of chambers, designed not just for rest, but for receiving, for contemplating, and for conducting the most private affairs of state and family. As you mentally step into these hallowed rooms, you notice the rich textiles, the soft glow of oil lamps, and perhaps the faint scent of incense. This space was the ultimate sanctuary, a place where the ruler could shed the heavy mantle of public life and be, to a degree, himself. The Sultan's chambers, often referred to collectively as the Imperial Hall or Sultan's apartments, were meticulously appointed. Imagine walking on incredibly soft, hand-woven carpets that muffled every footstep. The walls might be adorned with exquisite calligraphy, perhaps verses from the Quran, or intricate floral patterns painted directly onto the plaster. There would be low divans piled with cushions, inviting repose, and small ornate tables where tea or coffee would be served. It wasn't about ostentatious display for outsiders. There were no outsiders here, but about creating an environment of ultimate comfort, beauty, and privacy for the imperial presence. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Sultan's private world was the careful selection of his companions. This wasn't a random process, it was a highly organized system. The women chosen for the harem, known as Carrier or odalisques, were often young, intelligent, and beautiful, acquired through various means, sometimes as gifts, sometimes through purchase, and occasionally as captives. But simply being beautiful wasn't enough. They underwent rigorous training. Imagine them learning etiquette, music, poetry, dance, and even basic administration. The goal was to cultivate not just physical appeal, but refined companionship. A sultan's favorite might be a gifted musician, a captivating storyteller, or a sharp-witted conversationalist. It was about stimulating the mind as well as the senses. Think of the sheer effort involved in maintaining this system. From their earliest days in the harem, these girls were groomed for potential intimacy with the sultan. This training was comprehensive, covering everything from personal hygiene and beauty rituals to the art of conversation and pleasing their sovereign. Peter Webb, in The Erotic Spirit Through History, notes how various cultures throughout history have systematized the training of companions for rulers, and the Ottoman Harem stands out for its scale and sophistication in this regard. The aim was to create a refined, almost ethereal presence, rather than just a physical one, ensuring that the Sultan's private moments were surrounded by grace and beauty. It's like a very exclusive, incredibly intense finishing school, but with much higher stakes and a much smaller graduating class. A quirky tidbit that often surprises people is the emphasis on literacy and intellectual pursuits within the harem, even for those intended as concubines. While not all women achieved advanced scholarship, many were taught to read and write, particularly in Ottoman Turkish, Arabic, and Persian. This allowed them to engage with literature, poetry, and even administrative documents. The idea was that a sultan would find intellectual companionship as stimulating as physical attraction, and a well-read courier could offer valuable insights or simply provide engaging conversation. This also meant that secret messages, if needed, could be passed through written notes rather than whispered words, adding another layer to the harem's subtle dynamics. Historians still argue whether the Sultan's choice of a favorite was primarily based on romantic affection, political expediency, or simply physical attraction. While personal preference undoubtedly played a role, the political implications were never far from mind. A sultan might elevate a woman from a powerful allied family or one whose intelligence could prove beneficial in court intrigues. The harem was not just a private retreat, it was an extension of the imperial court, and every relationship within it, no matter how intimate, carried potential political weight. The ultimate goal for many of these women was to become a Haseki sultan, a favored consort who had borne the sultan a son. This elevated status came with immense power and privilege, akin to a queen. It meant that not only your own future, but the future of your children, and potentially the entire dynasty, depended on the sultan's continued favor. Imagine the subtle competition, the unspoken rivalries, and the careful strategies employed by the women to gain and maintain this coveted position. It wasn't always overt, dramatic clashes. More often, it was a delicate dance of influence, charm, and strategic alliances with key figures like the Valid Sultan or powerful eunuchs. The air, despite its serenity, often hummed with unspoken ambitions and careful observation. As you continue your journey through the harem, you begin to understand that its inhabitants were far more complex than simplistic tales often suggest. You're now encountering the reality that goes beyond the concubine stereotype. Forget the common notion of hundreds of idle women vying solely for the sultan's attention. The harem was, in many ways, a sophisticated imperial institution, a parallel court operating within the palace, with a highly stratified hierarchy and a wide array of roles. The women who entered the harem were not a monolithic group. They ranged from young girls brought in for training to mature women who served as teachers, musicians, calligraphers, or even administrative staff. Many were highly skilled in various arts and crafts, contributing significantly to the cultural life of the palace. Imagine women meticulously embroidering intricate patterns onto imperial robes or composing haunting melodies on traditional instruments. These were not just ornaments, they were active contributors to the daily functioning and cultural richness of the Ottoman court. It's like a very exclusive, incredibly talented finishing school, but with much higher stakes and a much smaller graduating class. At the lowest rung of the hierarchy were the asimi, the novices, who were just beginning their training. They would learn palace etiquette, the nuances of Ottoman Turkish, and the skills deemed necessary for their future roles. Above them were the kariye or odalisks, the general body of female attendants. Only a select few of these might ever catch the sultan's eye and be elevated to a higher status. Those who did and bore the sultan a child, especially a son, gained immense prestige and became hasekis, or favored consorts, holding significant power. One of the most profound roles, often overlooked in popular narratives, was that of the kalfa. These were experienced women, often older, who had risen through the ranks and served as overseers, teachers, and administrators within the harem. They managed the daily operations, instructed the younger girls, and ensured order. Imagine a seasoned kalfa, her face etched with years of experience, calmly directing dozens of servants, resolving disputes, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. They were the backbone of the harem, holding immense practical authority and influence. It was their quiet, efficient work that allowed the system to function. Think of them as the unsung heroes of imperial logistics, ensuring the sultan's socks were always folded correctly and no one ran out of rosewater. A quirky tidbit is that many women in the harem, even those who never gained the sultan's romantic attention, found fulfillment and even considerable wealth through their assigned duties. Talented artists, calligraphers, or musicians could earn substantial incomes from the sultan or other powerful figures within the palace. Some even established charitable foundations or endowed mosques, leaving a lasting legacy. Their influence extended far beyond the private quarters, touching the public life of the empire. This challenges the stereotype of women in the harem as powerless, highlighting their agency within a highly structured system. Historians still argue whether the opportunities for advancement within the harem represented true freedom or simply a different form of gilded servitude. While a woman could rise from humble beginnings to immense power, her ultimate position was still contingent on the sultan's favor and the birth of male heirs. The system provided a path to influence, but it was a path defined and restricted by the imperial framework. There was no opting out once you were in. From Sex with Kings by Eleanor Herman, we gain insight into how the very structure of royal concubinage, while often appearing restrictive, also fostered a unique kind of intimacy born of shared experience and mutual dependency. While the sultan might have many companions, the daily lives of the women within the harem often revolved around each other, forming bonds of friendship, rivalry, and sometimes deep affection. The book illustrates how the physical proximity and shared isolation of these women, even in their competition for the monarch's favor, often led to complex emotional landscapes. For instance, the system of going to the sultan's bed was highly ritualized. It wasn't just a spontaneous act. A chosen woman would undergo elaborate preparations, special baths, perfumes, and clothing, before being escorted to the sultan's private chambers. This ritualization, while seemingly formal, also imbued the act with a sense of significance and anticipation, a far cry from casual encounters. The woman would then spend the night, returning to her own chambers only the next morning, having performed her duty and hopefully advanced her standing. The roles within the harem extended to caring for the imperial children, managing complex household accounts, and even acting as informal diplomats when powerful women received foreign envoys' wives. It was a bustling, living community, not a static collection of beauties. The harem truly was a world unto itself, often more complex and nuanced than any simplified narrative can convey. You can almost hear the quiet hum of activity, the rustle of silks, and the soft murmur of conversations as these varied lives unfolded behind closed doors. As you delve deeper into the intricate social fabric of the harem, one figure consistently emerges as the most powerful, the most influential, and often the most feared: the Valid Sultan. Imagine a woman who, despite being confined within the palace walls, held sway over an empire. This was the Sultan's mother, and her position was not merely honorary, it was a bedrock of Ottoman imperial power, especially during periods known as the Sultanate of Women. The Valid Sultan's apartments were typically the most lavish and extensive in the harem, second only to the Sultan's own. As you glide past, you might catch a glimpse of richer silks, more intricate mosaics, and perhaps even a personal mosque or a private garden. This wasn't just about comfort, it was a visible symbol of her unparalleled status. She presided over the entire harem, managing its vast staff, its finances, and overseeing the education and well-being of its inhabitants, including the imperial princes. She was, in essence, the CEO of this vast private empire. Her influence extended far beyond the harem's physical confines. She was the Sultan's most trusted advisor, a sounding board for political decisions, and often a shrewd negotiator behind the scenes. Think of her as a grand master of a very complex chess game, where the pieces were not pawns and knights, but viziers, pashas, and foreign ambassadors. Her access to the Sultan was unparalleled. She could enter his presence unannounced, and her advice, though not always followed, was rarely dismissed lightly. This was often the only woman who could truly challenge the Sultan's will without fear of immediate reprisal. One of the key aspects of her power was her control over the imperial purse strings, or at least a substantial portion of them. The Valid Sultan often managed vast endowments, properties, and charitable foundations. This allowed her to wield considerable economic influence, granting favors, sponsoring projects, and building her own network of loyalties, both within and outside the palace. She could be a patron of the arts, a builder of mosques and bridges, or a quiet force shaping the economic landscape of the capital. It's like having your own personal, incredibly wealthy venture capital fund, but for imperial projects and political favors. A quirky tidbit that underscores her political maneuvering involves strategic marriages. While the Sultan himself might marry foreign princesses for diplomatic alliances, the Valid Sultan often arranged the marriages of her daughters and granddaughters to powerful viziers and generals. These alliances cemented political loyalties and extended the family's influence throughout the empire. It was a subtle, yet incredibly effective, way of ensuring the stability of the dynasty and her own family's position. Imagine orchestrating elaborate weddings that were not just celebrations of love, but carefully calculated political maneuvers. Historians still argue whether the power wielded by the Valid sultans was a sign of female empowerment within the Ottoman system, or simply a reflection of the fragility of certain sultans who relied heavily on their mothers. While they certainly held immense power, their authority was largely derived from their relationship to the male ruler, and their influence could wane if their sons proved strong enough to rule independently. It was a paradox: immense power, but still within a fundamentally patriarchal structure. Michel Foucault's insights into the relationship between power, knowledge, and discourse are particularly relevant when considering the Valid Sultan. Her position as the Sultan's mother gave her a unique form of knowledge, intimate understanding of the Sultan's personality, his moods, and his vulnerabilities. This knowledge, coupled with her authority within the harem, allowed her to exert a subtle yet profound influence on the Sultan's decisions, often through veiled suggestions or carefully chosen pieces of information. The harem, in this sense, became a space where private knowledge was transformed into public power, a testament to the fact that power isn't always wielded with a sword, but often with a whisper. This was far from mere gossip. It was strategic information warfare, albeit fought with silks and smiles. Think of Kosum Sultan, one of the most famous and formidable Valid sultans, who effectively ruled the empire through several weak or young sultans in the 17th century. Her story is filled with political intrigue, strategic alliances, and ruthless decisions made to protect her sons and consolidate her own power. You can almost feel the weight of her presence, the aura of authority that radiated from her, even in the quietest corners of the harem. Her influence could be felt from the highest echelons of the divan, the imperial council, down to the lowliest kitchen servant. The whispers of the harem, when they came from her, could shake the very foundations of the empire. As you delve deeper into the intricate social fabric of the harem, one remarkable, often overlooked aspect emerges with clarity: the profound emphasis placed on education and learning. You might imagine a place of idle luxury, filled with women solely focused on personal adornment or whispered intrigues. Yet in many ways, the harem functioned as a highly sophisticated academy, a private university meticulously designed for the intellectual and artistic cultivation of the young women who entered its gilded gates. From the very moment a new carrier or odalisque arrived, often as a girl barely into her teens, her rigorous education commenced. This was far from a superficial training. It was a comprehensive curriculum intended to transform her into a well-rounded, cultured individual, capable of engaging in sophisticated conversation and contributing meaningfully to the palace's vibrant intellectual life. Imagine the scene: girls gathered in sunlit courtyards or hushed reading rooms, their soft voices reciting lessons, or their hands meticulously practicing intricate crafts. They would learn the subtle nuances of palace etiquette, the graceful art of movement, and the delicate dance of social graces, essential for navigating the complex harem hierarchy. One of the cornerstones of this extensive education was undoubtedly music and dance. These were not merely recreational pastimes. They were considered indispensable skills for any refined woman of the imperial court. You might drift past an open doorway and hear the gentle, melancholic strumming of a oud, a pear-shaped stringed instrument, or the resonant plucking of a kanun, a zither-like instrument, accompanied by the rhythmic tap of a darbuka, a goblet drum. Groups of girls would practice for hours under the tutelage of accomplished musicians, mastering complex melodies and intricate choreographies. A woman who could play an instrument beautifully, compose a haunting tune, or perform an elegant, disciplined dance was highly valued, not only for her ability to entertain the Sultan, but for the grace, discipline, and emotional depth these arts instilled within her. It was also a profoundly important avenue for them to express their inner worlds, their hopes, and their quiet aspirations within the serene confines of their secluded existence. Beyond the performing arts, poetry and calligraphy held equally prestigious positions within the harem's academic pursuits. Many women, even those not destined for the Sultan's bed, became remarkably skilled poets, composing verses that eloquently articulated their joys, their quiet sorrows, and their profound observations of the world within their walls. Calligraphy, the ancient and revered art of beautiful writing, was equally important, demanding both immense artistic talent and rigorous intellectual discipline. Imagine the soft, rhythmic scratch of a reed pen on fine parchment as a young woman meticulously forms an elegant Arabic or Persian script, each stroke a testament to her concentration and dedication. These were not mere hobbies. They were powerful avenues for deep intellectual stimulation, personal growth, and a profound connection to the rich literary traditions of the Islamic world. It was akin to attending an incredibly fancy, highly specialized boarding school, where instead of grappling with calculus, you were mastering the delicate art of crafting the perfect poetic couplet or the most exquisite calligraphic flourish. A particularly quirky tidbit that often surprises modern observers is the widespread inclusion of foreign languages in the harem's curriculum. While Ottoman Turkish was, naturally, the lingua franca, many women, especially those with the potential to interact with the Sultan or high-ranking officials, were taught Persian and Arabic. These were not just practical languages. They were the sacred tongues of classical literature, religious texts, and sophisticated philosophical discourse. Some women, particularly in later periods of the empire, even learned European languages, especially French, which served as the universal language of diplomacy and high culture across Europe. This linguistic fluency meant that certain women within the harem could engage in incredibly sophisticated conversations on a wide array of political, cultural, and philosophical topics, sometimes even acting as informal interpreters or discreet advisors to the Sultan or the Valid Sultan during private receptions. It allowed for a level of intellectual engagement far beyond what stereotypes might suggest, transforming them into valuable assets within the complex web of imperial power. Historians still actively debate whether the primary purpose of this remarkably extensive and sophisticated education was genuinely to empower the women within the harem, or simply to refine them into more aesthetically pleasing and intellectually stimulating companions for the Sultan. While the practical outcome was undoubtedly enhanced status, increased influence, and often considerable personal wealth, the underlying motivations were likely complex. It was probably a nuanced blend of traditional Ottoman values that deeply prized learning and cultural refinement, coupled with the pragmatic desire to populate the imperial household with intelligent, articulate, and highly skilled women who could contribute to the prestige and smooth functioning of the palace. The harem was, after all, a reflection of the Ottoman court's own intellectual and cultural aspirations, and it aimed to foster excellence in all its spheres. From The History of Sexuality, Michel Foucault explores how education, even within seemingly restrictive or controlled environments, can function as a subtle yet powerful form of social control, meticulously shaping individuals to fit very specific societal roles and expectations. In the context of the harem, this elaborate educational system meticulously molded individuals to embody the ideal of Ottoman femininity, intellectual refinement, and imperial grace. The very act of teaching and learning, while ostensibly offering a path to personal development, also implicitly reinforced the boundaries and inherent expectations of their roles within the imperial household. However, and this is a crucial nuance, it simultaneously provided a profound means for these women to develop their individual talents, cultivate their intellects, and foster a strong sense of personal agency, even if their external freedoms were severely limited. Imagine a woman who might not only charm the Sultan with her physical beauty, but also captivate him with her sharp wit, her insightful commentary on a Persian poem, or her eloquent handling of a diplomatic query in French. That, you see, was a very real, very subtle form of power. You can almost feel the quiet intensity of these learning sessions permeating the harem walls. The soft rustle of silk as a student turns a page, the hushed murmur of lessons being diligently recited, the occasional gentle correction from a kalfa. The harem was, in essence, a place of constant learning, continuous refinement, and profound cultural immersion, a living testament to the Ottoman belief that even within its most private and secluded quarters, intellectual curiosity and artistic excellence should not only be encouraged, but should genuinely flourish. This substantial investment in the education and cultural enrichment of its female inhabitants strongly suggests a deeper appreciation for their individual talents and capacities, reaching far beyond mere physical attributes. It paints a picture of a truly unique and surprisingly dynamic educational institution, hidden in plain sight. Emerging from the quiet intensity of the harem's classrooms, your path now leads you to encounter another crucial, often misunderstood, group within its walls: the eunuchs, the guardians of the threshold. These men, castrated either before or during their time in the palace, were far more than mere servants. They were the vital link between the secluded world of the harem and the outside realm, holding positions of immense trust, power, and responsibility. You might first notice their distinctive appearance, often tall and imposing, yet moving with a quiet efficiency. They were the only adult males, apart from the Sultan himself and sometimes his young sons, permitted to enter the harem. This unique access granted them an unparalleled vantage point, making them privy to both the intimate daily lives of the women and the subtle political currents swirling through the palace. They were the eyes and ears of the Sultan within his private domain, responsible for security, communication, and the smooth functioning of this vast household. There were two main groups of eunuchs: the black eunuchs, kızlar, and the white eunuchs, kapı. The black eunuchs, typically of African origin, were by far the most powerful within the harem itself. Their chief, the kızlar, was one of the most influential figures in the entire Ottoman Empire, often ranking higher than grand viziers. Imagine a man who, despite his physical emasculation, wielded more real power than many a battlefield general or seasoned diplomat. He controlled access to the harem, relayed messages to and from the Sultan, oversaw the harem's finances, and was responsible for the discipline and conduct of all its inhabitants. He was, in essence, the supreme commander of the harem, its chief of staff, and its head of security, all rolled into one imposing figure. The white eunuchs, on the other hand, were often of European or Caucasian origin, and typically held positions outside the innermost harem, managing the outer palace gates and controlling access to the imperial council. While less directly involved with the harem's daily life, they still held significant authority within the broader palace administration. It's like having two separate slums, but equally formidable, security forces, each with their own specialized domain. A quirky tidbit is the eunuchs' surprising role in communication and gossip. Due to their unique position, moving freely between the Sultan's private apartments, the harem, and the outer court, they became conduits of information. Whispers from the harem could reach the Sultan's ears through a trusted eunuch, and imperial decrees could be subtly conveyed to the harem women. This made them invaluable assets for political intrigue, capable of relaying messages, forming alliances, and even swaying opinions with carefully chosen words or silences. They were the ultimate palace gossip column, but with actual power to back it up. Historians still argue whether the eunuch system was primarily designed for security and control, or if it also served as a way for the Sultan to have loyal, unthreatening male advisors who could not pose a dynastic threat. Without the ability to father heirs, eunuchs had no direct lineage to promote, theoretically ensuring their absolute loyalty to the Sultan and the imperial family. This made them ideal guardians of a system deeply concerned with lineage and legitimacy. Sex with Kings by Eleanor Herman, though focusing on European courts, often touches upon the role of non-threatening male figures in close proximity to royal women. While not explicitly about Ottoman eunuchs, the book highlights how proximity to power, even without direct sexual or dynastic implications, can still translate into immense influence and trust. In the Ottoman context, the eunuchs, particularly the kızlar, sometimes acted as intermediaries in highly sensitive matters, involving the sultan's personal life or the concerns of his consorts. They might discreetly arrange for a favorite consort to spend time with the sultan or convey a delicate message about a pregnancy or an illness. Their very desexualized status, ironically, gave them a unique, trusted access to the most intimate aspects of the imperial family's existence. They were the ultimate confidantes, holding secrets that could make or break careers, or even lives. You might imagine them moving with a quiet solemnity, their faces often impassive, revealing little of the vast amounts of information they processed daily. They were often highly educated, loyal, and incredibly shrewd. For the women of the harem, a eunuch could be a guardian, a confidante, a messenger, or sometimes a stern disciplinarian. Their presence was a constant reminder of the boundaries of the harem, but also of the powerful hands that managed its delicate balance. It was a peculiar, almost contradictory existence, where physical absence of certain attributes led directly to an abundance of political and social power. Having explored the architecture, the sultan's private world, the diverse roles of the women, and the formidable eunuchs, we now turn to the rhythm that pulsed beneath the surface of the harem, its daily rhythms and rituals. This wasn't a static tableau of silent beauty. It was a living, breathing community with a schedule, routines, and a fascinating array of daily activities. Imagine waking up in this secluded world, far from the sounds of Langsun traffic, to a morning chorus of birds and the distant clinking of water pitchers. The harem's day began early, often before dawn, with the call to prayer. For the devout, this meant rising for Fajr, the morning prayer, and beginning the day with spiritual contemplation. Soon after, the complex would slowly stir to life. Servants, overseen by the kalfas and eunuchs, would begin their tasks. Imagine the quiet preparations, the gentle sweeping of courtyards, the lighting of braziers for warmth, and the meticulous arrangement of breakfast trays. The air would gradually fill with the subtle aromas of freshly baked bread, strong coffee, and perhaps the sweet scent of fruit. Breakfast was typically a light, yet elegant affair. You might imagine the women gathering in small groups in their respective apartments or in communal dining areas, sipping coffee and enjoying fresh fruits, pastries, and perhaps some light cheese. It was a time for quiet conversation, for planning the day's activities, or simply for enjoying the peaceful morning hours. This wasn't a boisterous public meal. Rather, it was a private, intimate gathering, reflecting the harem's overall ethos of discretion. After breakfast, the day's more structured activities would begin. For the younger girls, this meant continuing their education in music, calligraphy, languages, or embroidery, as we discussed earlier. Older women might attend to their administrative duties, manage their personal finances, or simply engage in leisurely pursuits like reading, gossiping with friends, or tending to their small, private gardens. The sheer variety of activities meant that boredom, though certainly a potential challenge in a confined space, was often combated through engagement in skills and social interaction. One quirky tidbit about the harem's daily routine involved the baths, hammams. Bathing was not merely about hygiene, it was a significant social ritual. The harem contained numerous hammams, from large communal ones to smaller, more private facilities. Imagine the soothing steam, the scent of rosewater and natural soaps, and the gentle chatter of women as they bathed, massaged, and relaxed. These hammams were crucial spaces for social bonding, for sharing news, and for moments of quiet intimacy away from the prying eyes of servants or strict hierarchies. They were the original, high-end spas, but with far more significant social implications. Historians still argue whether the apparent leisure of harem life was a genuine luxury or a subtle form of control. While the women certainly lived in comfort and had access to resources, their daily lives were ultimately dictated by the palace's routines and the sultan's preferences. Their leisure often served the purpose of refinement and preparing them for their imperial duties, rather than purely personal fulfillment. It was a golden cage, remember, albeit one with excellent room service. From The Erotic Spirit Through History by Peter Webb, we can infer that the careful structuring of daily life, even in intimate settings, served to create a particular form of sensuality. The emphasis on cleanliness, perfumed air, luxurious textiles, and gentle routines contributed to an environment where the senses were constantly engaged in subtle, pleasing ways. Consider the practice of oiling and massaging the skin after bathing, or the meticulous preparation of fine garments. These daily rituals, seemingly mundane, contributed to an overall atmosphere of refined sensuality, shaping the women into beings of subtle allure for the Sultan. The very pace of life was designed to be gentle, almost soporific, ensuring a calm, pleasing environment. The afternoons might involve visits between apartments, elaborate tea ceremonies, or perhaps the arrival of merchants selling fine fabrics, jewels, or perfumes at the harem gates, their wares brought inside by trusted eunuchs. Evenings would bring dinner, often a communal affair for specific groups of women, followed by storytelling, music, or quiet contemplation. The atmosphere would slowly quiet down as night approached, the soft glow of lamps illuminating the pathways, and the sounds of distant city life fading into the tranquil hum of the harem. The constant presence of the eunuchs, though discreet, was a pervasive undercurrent, ensuring that the day's flow adhered to established rules and security protocols. Their silent oversight was part of the fabric of everyday life, an ever-present yet often unseen guiding hand. As the daily rhythms of the harem settle into a gentle hum around you, your ethereal senses begin to pick up on the softer, more resonant frequencies of its inner life, the pervasive presence of music, poetry, and pastimes. Far from being a place of mere idleness, the harem was a vibrant cultural hub, a sanctuary where artistic expression flourished, providing both entertainment and a vital outlet for the women who called it home. Imagine a soft, melodic tune drifting from a nearby chamber. It's likely the sound of an oud or a ney, a traditional flute, played with exquisite skill. Music was not just appreciated, it was meticulously taught and widely practiced. Many women in the harem were accomplished musicians, trained from a young age in the classical Ottoman tradition. They would play for their own enjoyment, for their friends, or on special occasions for the Sultan himself. This wasn't background noise. It was an active, engaging pursuit, filling the quiet corridors with beauty. Poetry held an equally revered place. Ottoman society, especially its elite, was steeped in the appreciation of verse. Within the harem, women not only listened to recited poems but composed their own. These poems often spoke of love, longing, beauty, and the subtle nuances of life within their secluded world. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of crafting a perfect couplet, a subtle lament, or a verse praising the Sultan's virtues. This intellectual and emotional outlet was crucial, offering a voice to those whose public expression was limited. Some women's poems were even circulated outside the harem, though often anonymously, contributing to the broader literary landscape of the empire. It's like being in a very exclusive book club, where everyone is also a published author, but no one uses their real name. One quirky tidbit about these pastimes involves shadow puppet theater, karagoz, and hachivat. While primarily a public entertainment, simplified versions of these humorous plays would sometimes be performed within the harem for the amusement of the women and children. Imagine the flickering lamplight, casting the silhouettes of the puppets against a white screen, as a voice narrates tales of wit and folly, providing moments of light-hearted laughter and escape from the more serious aspects of court life. It was a cherished form of popular culture brought into the heart of the imperial private sphere. Beyond formal arts, the women engaged in a variety of other pastimes. Storytelling was a beloved tradition. Imagine gatherings in the evening, perhaps in a quiet courtyard under the stars, where an elder kalfa or a particularly gifted storyteller would recount ancient legends, folk tales, or even recent events from the outside world, filtered and softened for the harem's ears. These narratives provided entertainment, moral lessons, and a vital connection to the broader human experience. Historians still argue whether these artistic pursuits were primarily a means of occupying the women's time, or if they genuinely fostered a unique form of female cultural expression. While they certainly served to keep the women engaged and refined, the sheer quality and depth of some of the artistic output suggests a genuine passion and talent that transcended mere occupation. It was a space where creative minds, despite their confinement, could truly flourish. From The Erotic Spirit Through History by Peter Webb, we can further understand how these leisure activities, particularly music and poetry, often subtly permeated the realm of intimacy and courtship. The ability to compose a beautiful love poem, to play a soulful melody on an instrument, or to engage in witty poetic banter became a form of erotic communication within the harem. It wasn't always about explicit acts. Often, the very subtlety of artistic expression could be more profoundly alluring. Imagine a sultan being captivated not just by a woman's beauty, but by a poem she wrote that spoke directly to his soul, or by the emotion she poured into a musical piece. These artistic talents elevated companionship beyond the purely physical, making intellectual and emotional connection a significant part of the imperial intimacy, reinforcing the idea that pleasure wasn't just physical. This added a layer of depth and sophistication to the relationships within the harem, moving beyond simplistic notions of desire. Other common pastimes included elaborate embroidery and needlework, producing stunning textiles that adorned the palace or were given as gifts. Board games like chess or backgammon offered intellectual stimulation and friendly competition. Even the simple act of tending to small potted plants in their chambers or personal courtyards provided a quiet, meditative activity, a connection to growth and life within their enclosed world. The quiet hum of creativity, the soft notes of music, and the thoughtful murmur of recited poetry would have been constant companions for the harem's inhabitants. These were not merely diversions. They were integral to the psychological well-being and cultural enrichment of the women, providing solace, fostering bonds, and allowing for forms of self-expression that transcended the strictures of their environment. You can almost feel the peaceful, almost hypnotic rhythm of these artistic pursuits, a soothing backdrop to the unfolding narrative of imperial life. As you continue your silent observation of the harem's inner workings, you begin to notice that communication here transcends mere spoken words. You are now attuned to the language of flowers and veils, a subtle yet incredibly rich lexicon of unspoken rules, nuanced gestures, and symbolic meanings that define social interaction within this highly discreet world. In a place where directness could be risky and privacy was paramount, nonverbal cues became paramount. Imagine a scene where a particular flower, perhaps a yellow hyacinth or a red tulip, is left discreetly on a divan. In Ottoman flower language, each bloom carried a specific message. A hyacinth might denote joy, while a red tulip, passion. These floral arrangements were not just decorative, they were silent letters, conveying sentiments that might be too risky or too intimate to utter aloud. A message about secret affection, quiet discontent, or even a subtle warning could be passed through the delicate petals and precise placement of a bloom. It was a beautiful ephemeral code, understood by those initiated into its nuances. It's like a very fragrant, incredibly high-stakes game of charades, but with actual flowers. The veil, or more broadly, clothing and adornment, also played a significant role in this silent communication. While not all women in the harem wore full face veils constantly, it varied by region, era, and personal preference, especially indoors. The concept of concealment and revelation was central. A subtly lowered gaze, a slight adjustment of a head covering, or the choice of a particular color or fabric could convey status, mood, or even an unspoken invitation. The rustle of silk, the glint of a hidden jewel, or the gentle swish of a skirt could all carry implicit messages. One quirky tidbit about this nonverbal communication was the handkerchief code. Young women might carry beautifully embroidered handkerchiefs, and the way they held, dropped, or folded them could signal interest or disinterest to a potential suitor if, say, the sultan was present, or in the rare instances of controlled interaction with male visitors from outside the inner harem. A dropped handkerchief might be an invitation, while a tightly clutched one a sign of modesty or disapproval. It was a delicate dance of signals, far more intricate than a simple wink. Historians still argue whether the complexity of these unspoken codes was a natural evolution of a private society or a deliberate strategy to maintain control and hierarchy. While it certainly fostered a unique culture, it also meant that misinterpretations could occur, leading to misunderstandings or even unintended consequences. The system was precise, but also vulnerable to subtle errors in decoding. It reminds you of trying to read someone's face through a thick Langsun fog. In The History of Sexuality, Michel Foucault emphasizes how societies construct elaborate systems of meaning around bodies, gestures, and appearance. In the harem, this was taken to an extreme. The way a woman carried herself, the elegance of her movements, the scent of her perfumes, and the arrangement of her attire all contributed to a carefully curated image that communicated far more than words. The absence of overt sexual display, paradoxically, heightened the power of these subtle cues. The sensuality was not in what was revealed, but in the suggestion, the hidden, and the carefully controlled. The eroticism lay in the anticipation, the almost imperceptible hint. For example, a woman might wear a delicate, transparent scarf that subtly revealed the curve of her neck or the line of her shoulder, creating an allure far greater than any overt exposure. This deliberate use of semi-transparency and concealment created a powerful dynamic of attraction based on suggestion and imagination, rather than explicit sight. It was a sophisticated game of peekaboo where the peek was always more tantalizing than the boo. Think of the subtle nuances of body language. A woman's posture, the way she held her hands, or the angle of her head could convey deference, confidence, or even a quiet defiance. Learning to read these cues was essential for navigating the harem's social landscape and for understanding one's place within its intricate hierarchy. The Valid Sultan, for instance, would communicate much through her regal bearing and the subtle tilt of her chin, more so than through lengthy pronouncements. Even the silence within the harem was a form of communication. Long pauses, unspoken understandings, and knowing glances were often more potent than direct conversation. This quietness wasn't just about peace, it was about discretion, about protecting secrets, and about maintaining an atmosphere of dignified privacy. It was a world where a shared glance across a courtyard could convey volumes, and where a single, carefully chosen gesture could change fortunes. The very air was thick with unspoken words, a symphony of subtle signals waiting to be deciphered by the discerning observer. Having immersed ourselves in the unspoken communication of the harem, we now approach a facet of its existence that, despite its grand setting, was profoundly human and universal: love, loss, and royal alliances. The harem, for all its structural rigidity and political purpose, was a place where genuine human emotions bloomed and faded, often intertwined with the strategic imperatives of an empire. While many women entered the harem as part of a system designed to produce legitimate heirs and consolidate power, individual affections and deep bonds inevitably formed. Love, whether romantic or familial, found ways to blossom even within these highly controlled environments. Imagine the quiet, blossoming affection between a sultan and a particularly favored carrier, an emotional connection that went beyond mere physical attraction, leading to genuine companionship and mutual respect. These were the relationships that could truly shape the future of the dynasty, giving a concubine immense, if unofficial, power. The path to becoming a Haseki Sultan, a favored consort who bore the Sultan a son, was not just about progeny. It often involved a deep emotional connection that allowed her to wield significant influence. Eleanor Herman, in Sex with Kings, meticulously details how powerful monarchs, even those with numerous partners, often form singular, profound attachments. These relationships, while still bound by the strictures of their era and position, could lead to immense personal happiness, shared confidences, and a unique form of partnership. A sultan might seek not just physical solace, but intellectual and emotional companionship from his Haseki, making her a true confidant and advisor. It's like finding your soulmate, but they also have to oversee hundreds of people and possibly advise on foreign policy. Of course, with love came the ever-present shadow of loss. The harem was not immune to tragedy. Child mortality rates were high, and the death of an infant prince or princess was a source of profound grief for the mother and often for the sultan himself. The loss of a favored consort, whether to illness or natural causes, could also deeply affect the ruler, leading to periods of mourning and potentially shifting the balance of power within the harem as new favorites emerged. Imagine the quiet sorrow that would settle over a courtyard, the hushed whispers of condolences, and the palpable absence left by a cherished individual. Beyond personal affection, royal alliances were a pragmatic cornerstone of Ottoman foreign policy, and the harem played a crucial, albeit often indirect, role. While Ottoman sultans generally married fewer foreign princesses than their European counterparts, marriages of imperial princesses, The sultan's daughters or sisters to powerful viziers and generals were common. These were strategic unions designed to cement loyalties, reward service, and integrate powerful families into the imperial network. The harem was where these princesses were raised and educated, preparing them for their roles as imperial brides, ensuring they understood the delicate balance of power and decorum required. A quirky tidbit related to royal alliances is the concept of alliance through kinship, even with eunuchs. While not romantic in nature, the bond between a Valid Sultan or a powerful Haseki and her loyal chief eunuch could be as strong as any familial tie, based on mutual trust, shared secrets, and intertwined fates. These relationships, devoid of sexual or romantic undertones, were nonetheless deeply personal and often crucial for navigating the treacherous currents of palace politics. Imagine the absolute trust required to confide your deepest fears or most ambitious plans to someone who held so much private information. Historians still argue whether the Haseki system, where a single favored consort gained immense power, was a deliberate innovation to centralize female influence or an unforeseen consequence of powerful individual women navigating a system designed for a broader pool of concubines. It certainly led to periods of intense female political power, often referred to as the Sultanate of Women, suggesting a dynamic interplay between individual ambition and systemic structures. Peter Webb, in The Erotic Spirit Through History, discusses how even in structured societies, human desire and connection find avenues for expression, often shaping societal norms in return. In the harem, the intricate rituals surrounding the sultan's visits to his chosen companion, or the established protocols for a Haseki to make requests, reveal a system that, while seemingly rigid, accommodated and even formalized emotional and intimate exchanges. The anticipation created by the daily selection process, the careful preparation, and the discreet escort to the sultan's chamber all serve to heighten the emotional and erotic significance of these encounters, elevating them beyond mere procreation. This institutionalized romance was a unique blend of personal desire and imperial necessity, creating a fascinating dance between the individual heart and the demands of state. Ultimately, the harem, for all its strictures, was a microcosm of human experience. Within its walls, love was found and lost, families were formed and mourned, and personal destinies were forever intertwined with the grand narrative of an empire. You can almost feel the weight of these human dramas, playing out against a backdrop of unparalleled luxury and quiet seclusion. Having explored the emotional landscape of the harem, we now turn to a more tangible aspect of its reality, the golden cage of luxury. While the women of the harem certainly experienced restrictions on their freedom of movement, they were simultaneously surrounded by an opulence that was unparalleled in most of the world. This paradox, immense material comfort coupled with profound confinement, is central to understanding their lives. Imagine the sheer sensory overload of this luxury. You are walking on carpets woven with threads of gold and silver, so thick your feet almost disappear into them. The walls around you are adorned with tiles that shimmer with iridescent blues and greens, reflecting the soft light from stained glass windows. Every piece of furniture, from the low divans to the intricate inlaid chests, is a work of art crafted from the finest woods and decorated with mother of pearl or precious stones. This wasn't just comfort, it was a deliberate display of imperial wealth and power, a constant reminder of the Sultan's boundless resources. The clothing worn by the harem inhabitants was equally extravagant. We'll delve more into fashion later, but for now, imagine the rustle of silks, velvets, and brocades, often embroidered with gold thread and pearls. The jewels would have been dazzling. Emeralds, rubies, diamonds, and sapphires, adorning not just the Valid Sultan or the Hasekis, but many of the concubines and even high-ranking Khalfas. This wasn't merely about personal vanity. It was about reflecting the grandeur of the Ottoman Empire through the attire of its most private residents. It's like living in a constantly updated, incredibly exclusive fashion show, but the only audience is the Sultan and a few hundred other women. One of the most defining aspects of this luxury was the access to exotic foods and rare commodities. The palace kitchens serving the harem were renowned for their variety and sophistication. Imagine feasting on dishes made with spices from the far corners of the empire, fruits brought from distant lands, and the finest cuts of meat prepared with elaborate sauces. Beyond food, consider the constant supply of exquisite perfumes from Arabia, fine silks from China, and delicate porcelain from Persia. These goods, often rare and incredibly expensive outside the palace, were everyday occurrences within the harem, a testament to its privileged existence. A quirky tidbit often overlooked is the sheer number of personal servants dedicated to the harem's inhabitants. Even a lower-ranking carrier would have had several personal attendants to help with dressing, bathing, and daily chores. For the Valid Sultan, or a Haseki, the number could run into dozens, creating a complex ecosystem of service. This meant very little manual labor for the women themselves, allowing them to focus on their education, artistic pursuits, or social interactions. It was like living in a luxury hotel where every whim was catered to. Only you couldn't check out. Historians still argue whether this opulent lifestyle genuinely compensated for the lack of freedom or if it merely highlighted the paradox of their existence. While undeniably comfortable, the luxury was ultimately conditional, dependent on the Sultan's favor and the maintenance of the imperial system. It was a trade-off, where material abundance was exchanged for autonomy. For women from impoverished backgrounds, it was certainly an unimaginable improvement in quality of life. But for those of noble birth who were captured, it might have felt more like a gilded cage. Michel Foucault's work, particularly The History of Sexuality, examines how the very presence of luxury and specific material comforts can serve to both define and regulate the body and its pleasures. In the harem, the constant availability of baths, perfumes, fine clothing, and exquisite food created an environment where the senses were continually stimulated in a refined, controlled manner. The focus on bodily care and aesthetic pleasure was part of a larger system that shaped the desired forms of intimacy and sensuality. The opulent setting wasn't just for comfort, it actively contributed to the construction of a specific imperial sexuality, where desire was cultivated and expressed within a highly regulated aesthetic. The very air you breathed, thick with exotic perfumes, was part of this controlled sensuality. Even the architecture, as we noted earlier, contributed to this sense of luxurious confinement. The intricate design, the hidden gardens, and the private courtyards, while beautiful, also served to reinforce the boundaries. You could look out through a mashrabiyah screen and see the world, but you could not easily enter it. The sounds of the outside world, from the calls of street vendors to the bustling activities of the port, would have been distant murmurs, a constant reminder of the vibrant life from which they were largely separated. Yet, within these walls, every comfort was provided, every aesthetic pleasure catered to, making the harem a unique example of power expressed through both lavish display and meticulous control. As you continue to absorb the luxurious yet secluded atmosphere of the harem, your attention now shifts to the meticulous daily practices that upheld the beauty and well-being of its inhabitants, the ancient health and beauty secrets. In a world where physical appearance and vitality were often intrinsically linked to status and imperial favor, these routines were far more than simple vanity. They were essential components of harem life. Imagine the elaborate preparations that would begin each day. The women of the harem, from the highest-ranking Haseki to the newest carrier, would engage in precise rituals to maintain their allure. This wasn't just about makeup, it was about holistic wellness, combining ancient remedies, natural ingredients, and a deep understanding of the body. You can almost smell the soothing scent of rosewater and natural oils mingling with herbal infusions. Central to their beauty regimen were the hammams, or Turkish baths, as we touched upon earlier. But beyond just bathing, these were places for elaborate treatments. Imagine being gently exfoliated with a coarse glove, then massaged with fragrant olive oils infused with jasmine or amber. Special volcanic clays were used for facial masks, drawing out impurities and leaving the skin glowing. The steam of the hammam itself was considered beneficial for both skin and respiration, creating a truly spa-like experience. This was no quick shower. It was a ritual of purification and pampering, often lasting for hours, ensuring soft skin and relaxed muscles. It's like an all-inclusive historical wellness retreat, but in a very humid, beautifully tiled room. Their hair care was equally meticulous. Long, lustrous hair was highly prized. Women would wash their hair with natural soaps made from olive oil, followed by rinses of herbal infusions, often containing chamomile for lightness or henna for conditioning and subtle color. Imagine the painstaking process of drying and braiding long tresses, sometimes adorned with pearls or delicate gold ornaments. The use of scented oils and pomades was also common, ensuring their hair was not only beautiful but also fragrant. One quirky tidbit about their beauty practices was the use of kohl for the eyes and natural dyes for lips and nails. Kohl, a dark powder, was not just for cosmetic purposes. It was believed to have medicinal properties, protecting the eyes from the glare of the sun and from various ailments. Lips and nails were often tinted with natural pigments derived from crushed flowers or berries, giving a subtle, healthy glow rather than the stark colors of modern makeup. This focus on enhancing natural beauty, rather than masking it, speaks to a different aesthetic ideal. Historians still argue whether the intense focus on beauty within the harem was a liberating form of self-care or another means of objectification and control. While it certainly provided women with a sense of personal agency over their appearance, the ultimate beneficiary was often the sultan, and the pressure to maintain one's physical appeal could be immense, especially in a competitive environment. It was a complex blend of personal ritual and imperial expectation. From The Erotic Spirit Through History by Peter Webb, we understand how physical aesthetics and the cultivation of the body were deeply intertwined with concepts of desire and allure in many historical contexts. In the harem, the meticulous daily rituals of cleansing, perfuming, and adornment served to create an environment where the body was perpetually presented as an object of refined sensuality. The emphasis on soft skin, fragrant hair, and subtle beauty was designed to heighten the senses and create a powerful, understated form of eroticism for the sultan. The act of bathing and self-adornment became a performative art, a silent declaration of desirability. This focus on physical perfection wasn't just for external admiration. It was part of an internal understanding of what constituted desirable feminine embodiment within that specific cultural framework. Beyond cosmetics, the harem also employed various ancient medical practices for general health and well-being. Herbal remedies, prepared by skilled palace physicians or experienced kalfas, were common for ailments ranging from indigestion to minor fevers. Diet played a significant role, with an emphasis on fresh fruits, vegetables, and lean meats. Regular physical activity, often in the form of gentle walks in the gardens or traditional dances, also contributed to their overall vitality. Even practices like depilation, the removal of body hair, were significant. This was not just about aesthetics. It was considered an important aspect of hygiene and purity in many Islamic cultures. Imagine the painstaking hours spent maintaining smooth skin, often using sugar-based waxes or natural concoctions. This commitment to meticulous grooming extended to every part of the body, creating an overall image of pristine, refined beauty. The air of the harem, even now in your imagination, feels clean and subtly fragrant, a testament to these elaborate and constant routines. Having absorbed the serene atmosphere of the harem's beauty rituals, let's now turn our ethereal noses and palates to one of the most delightful aspects of palace life, the culinary delights of the palace. The Ottoman court, and especially the harem, was renowned for its sophisticated cuisine. Food was more than sustenance. It was an art form, a symbol of status, and a source of immense pleasure. Imagine the subtle aromas wafting from the palace kitchens, promising a feast for the senses. The sheer scale of the palace kitchens, known as the matbaa mire, was astonishing. They were a massive complex of buildings dedicated solely to feeding the thousands of inhabitants of Topkapi Palace, including the Sultan, his family, the harem, and the vast army of servants and officials. You can almost hear the bustling activity, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, the sizzling of meat in vast pans, and the clatter of pottery. These kitchens employed hundreds of chefs, pastry makers, and specialized cooks, each dedicated to a particular type of dish. It was the original Michelin-starred catering service, but for an entire city of royals and their entourage. The harem's residents enjoyed a diet that was both varied and incredibly rich. Imagine daily meals featuring a wide array of meats, lamb, beef, and poultry, prepared in countless ways, slow-cooked stews, roasted with herbs, or skewered and grilled. Vegetables, often sourced from the palace's own gardens or brought in fresh from the fertile lands surrounding Istanbul, were abundant and prepared with a delicate touch, sometimes stuffed, sometimes pureed, always artfully presented. Rice dishes, pilafs, were a staple, prepared with saffron, nuts, and dried fruits, each grain separate and fluffy. Yogurts and cheeses, fresh and tangy, would accompany many meals, providing a cooling contrast. But it was the sweets that truly captured the imagination. Ottoman confectionery was legendary. Imagine syrupy baklava, delicate rose lokum, Turkish delight, halva, and fruit compotes. These weren't just desserts, they were intricate works of edible art, often served at the end of elaborate meals. You can almost taste the honeyed sweetness and the delicate crunch of pistachios. One quirky tidbit about the palace kitchens was the meticulous system of portion control and delivery. Each dish for the Sultan and the harem was carefully prepared, then sealed and escorted by trusted eunuchs to ensure no tampering. The food was often served in exquisite porcelain or silver dishes, ensuring that the presentation was as impeccable as the taste. This wasn't just about security. It was about maintaining the purity and prestige of imperial meals. It's like a highly advanced, ancient food delivery service, but with armed guards and intricate wax seals. Historians still argue whether the opulence of the harem's diet was a reflection of genuine gastronomic pleasure or simply another manifestation of imperial display. While undoubtedly delicious, the sheer abundance and variety served to underscore the Sultan's wealth and generosity, reinforcing the notion that his household lived in unparalleled luxury. It was both nourishment and a statement of power. From The Erotic Spirit Through History by Peter Webb, we can infer that food, especially rich and sensuous food, played a significant role in the overall atmosphere of luxury and pleasure within the harem. The act of sharing fine meals, the appreciation of exquisite flavors and aromas, contributed to a heightened sensory experience that was integral to the harem's allure. The meticulous preparation of meals, the emphasis on fresh ingredients, and the artistry of presentation all contributed to an environment where bodily pleasures, including those of the palate, were celebrated and refined. Food was not just fuel, it was part of the erotic landscape, subtly stimulating the senses and creating an atmosphere of indulgence that underscored the purpose of the harem as a place of royal pleasure and procreation. This wasn't just about avoiding hunger, it was about experiencing pure, unadulterated culinary delight, sometimes even described in poetic terms that evoked desire. Beverages, too, were important. While alcohol was generally forbidden in the deeply religious court, sherbets made from fruit juices, sugar, and rosewater or other floral extracts were incredibly popular. Imagine sipping a cool, refreshing cherry sherbet on a hot afternoon, or a rich, spiced almond sherbet on a cooler evening. Coffee, strong and dark, was also a central part of daily life, brewed and served with meticulous ritual, often in small, exquisite cups. The social aspect of dining within the harem was also significant. While the Sultan typically dined alone or with a favorite haseki, the women of the harem would often eat in smaller, more intimate groups within their own apartments. This provided another opportunity for social bonding, sharing news, and enjoying each other's company. The simple act of breaking bread together, even in this grand setting, fostered a sense of community. The sounds of gentle conversation and the clinking of delicate cutlery would have filled the dining spaces, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. As the delightful aromas of the harem's kitchens gently fade, your attention is drawn to another captivating aspect of its opulence, the exquisite fashion and adornment that graced its inhabitants. Clothing in the Ottoman harem was far more than mere covering. It was a potent language of status, wealth, and identity, a continuous, unspoken dialogue of luxury and beauty. Imagine the sheer tactile sensation of these garments. You're not seeing coarse fabrics, but the softest silks, shimmering velvets, and richly embroidered brocades. The colors would have been vibrant, reflecting the rich dyes available through Ottoman trade routes: deep emerald greens, ruby reds, sapphire blues, and imperial purples. These were not just everyday outfits. Many were designed for specific occasions, from daily wear within the chambers to more elaborate ensembles for special gatherings or when meeting the Sultan. It's like living in a never-ending haute couture show, but with far more intricate details and even more restrictive dress codes. The basic attire for women in the harem typically consisted of wide, flowing trousers, shalvar, often made of light silk, paired with a long, loose tunic or jacket tari. Over this, they might wear a more decorative robe or a fitted jacket. Layers were common, allowing for both modesty and warmth, and the interplay of different textures and patterns would have created visually stunning effects. You can almost feel the gentle swish of silk as a woman moves, the soft rustle a subtle counterpoint to the quiet atmosphere. Headwear was also significant. While the full outdoor veil charshaf was used when women left the palace, a rare occurrence for harem residents, inside the harem, simpler head coverings, delicate scarves, or intricate turbans adorned with jewels were common. These not only completed the ensemble, but also indicated status, with more elaborate headpieces reserved for the higher-ranking women, like the Valid Sultan or the Hasekis. But it was the jewels that truly sparkled. The Ottoman sultans possessed immense wealth, and a significant portion of it was transformed into magnificent jewelry for the imperial family. Imagine necklaces cascading with pearls, emeralds, and diamonds, bracelets heavy with gold and precious stones, and intricate earrings that swayed with every movement. Even the buttons on their garments might be made of tiny pearls or precious metals. These jewels weren't just decorative. They were a direct representation of the Sultan's power and generosity, adorning the women who were closest to him. One quirky tidbit is the use of perfume in conjunction with clothing. Fabrics were often infused with subtle, long-lasting fragrances like rose, amber, or musk. Imagine the delicate scent clinging to a silk robe, leaving a faint, pleasant trail as a woman walked by. This attention to olfactory detail added another layer to the overall aesthetic experience, ensuring that every sense was engaged in the presentation of beauty. It was about creating an entire sensory experience, not just a visual one. Historians still argue whether the extreme emphasis on lavish fashion and adornment in the harem was a sign of female agency and self-expression, or simply another form of control, compelling women to conform to a specific imperial ideal of beauty. While women certainly enjoyed and participated in the creation of their elaborate wardrobes, their choices were ultimately dictated by palace protocol and the prevailing tastes of the court. It was a luxurious form of uniform, reflecting the hierarchy. In The History of Sexuality, Michel Foucault often discusses how dress and bodily adornment are integral to the social construction of sexuality and desire. In the Ottoman harem, the elaborate and meticulous attention to clothing and jewelry served to highlight the women's bodies as objects of refined beauty and imperial allure. The layers of luxurious fabrics, the strategic placement of jewels, and the use of perfumes all worked in concert to create a highly sophisticated and controlled form of erotic presentation. The sensuality was often in the suggestion, the subtle reveal of a wrist or ankle beneath flowing fabric, rather than overt display. For example, a woman might wear a delicate sheer ferris outer cloak indoors, allowing hints of the vibrant colors and patterns beneath to peek through, creating an alluring mystery. This careful balance of concealment and suggestion was key to the harem's aesthetic of desire, ensuring that the body was always adorned in a way that spoke of both purity and potential pleasure, often simultaneously. Even the most mundane items like slippers could be exquisitely crafted, adorned with embroidery or beads. And the variety of belts, sashes, and scarves provided endless opportunities for personalization within the general framework of Ottoman court fashion. The overall effect would have been breathtakingly beautiful, a living tapestry of color, texture, and shimmering light, reflecting the ultimate imperial power that sponsored such a lavish existence. You can almost hear the soft rustle of silk and the gentle clink of jewels as these beautifully adorned figures move through their gilded world. Having explored the outward expressions of luxury in the harem's fashion, we now turn to the subtle yet constant undercurrents that truly defined its internal dynamics, intrigue, and whispers of power. Far from being a mere pleasure palace, the harem was a political arena, a delicate ecosystem where ambitions simmered, alliances shifted, and fates were decided through the quiet art of persuasion, manipulation, and sometimes outright cunning. Imagine the atmosphere. Despite the outward serenity and opulence, a constant tension hummed beneath the surface. Every woman, from the lowliest carrier to the most powerful Valid Sultan, was acutely aware of her position and the precarious nature of imperial favor. A seemingly innocent conversation could carry hidden meanings. A gift could be a subtle bribe. A casual remark could be a carefully placed piece of intelligence designed to undermine a rival. This was a place where information was currency and discretion was survival. It's like living in a very opulent, beautifully decorated spy novel where everyone is a potential double agent and the stakes are your entire future. The primary goal for many women was to catch the Sultan's eye and, crucially, to bear him a son. The birth of a male heir immediately elevated a woman's status, transforming her from a mere concubine into a Haseki Sultan, a powerful consort. This created intense, though often unspoken, rivalries between women who desired the same outcome. Imagine the subtle competition, not overt clashes, but a delicate dance of charm, intelligence, and strategic positioning to gain the Sultan's affection. A woman might subtly highlight a rival's perceived flaw, or discreetly boast of her own talents and virtues through intermediaries. The role of the eunuchs in this web of intrigue cannot be overstated. As we discussed, their unique access to both the harem and the outside court made them invaluable conduits of information. Powerful women would cultivate close relationships with influential eunuchs, offering gifts and promises in exchange for their loyalty and their ability to convey messages, carry out favors, or subtly influence the Sultan's perceptions. A whispered word from a trusted eunuch could make or break a woman's fortunes, or even dictate the Sultan's daily schedule and who he chose to spend his evenings with. One quirky tidbit about this internal politics was the concept of poisoned sweets. While outright assassination was rare and highly risky, there are historical anecdotes, often bordering on legend, of rivals attempting to undermine each other through more subtle means, like influencing food prepared for a competitor with mild purgatives or other unpleasant but non-lethal gas substances. This, while perhaps exaggerated in popular lore, highlights the lengths to which some might go to gain an advantage in a system where direct confrontation was largely forbidden. Historians still argue whether the level of intrigue within the harem was truly as intense as some accounts suggest, or if it has been romanticized and exaggerated over time. While palace life was certainly competitive, the strict rules and the pervasive presence of eunuchs and the Valid Sultan likely kept most overt machinations in check. Nevertheless, the subtle battles for influence were undoubtedly real and impactful. From Sex with Kings by Eleanor Herman, we learn that in many royal courts, intimacy with the monarch often translated directly into political power. This was certainly true in the Ottoman Harem. A woman who held the Sultan's affection could use her influence to advocate for certain policies, secure appointments for her favored officials, or even protect her family members outside the palace. Her pillow talk could quite literally become imperial policy. The book illustrates how private desire often fueled public outcomes, blurring the lines between the personal and the political. This wasn't about public debate or formal lobbying. It was a deeply personal form of power, wielded with a gentle touch and a carefully chosen word in the Sultan's most private moments. Imagine a sultan, relaxing after a long day of state affairs, listening to the quiet, subtle suggestions of a favored consort, perhaps without even realizing he was being influenced. This was the true art of harem intrigue, invisible, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly effective. The Valid Sultan, as the ultimate authority within the harem, was herself a master of this intricate dance of power. She would meticulously observe the interactions between the Sultan and his consorts, assess their characters, and decide which ones to favor or subtly undermine. Her decisions could shape the imperial line for generations. Her influence could ensure a favored concubine was brought to the Sultan's attention, or conversely, ensure a disfavored one remained in obscurity. Ultimately, the harem was a constant play of personal ambition against imperial structure. It was a place where individual whispers could become imperial thunder, and where a quiet life of luxury belied the intense, continuous struggle for status and power. You can almost feel the tension in the air, a silent electric current beneath the opulent surface, as each woman navigated her path in this golden cage of power. Having explored the subtle machinations of harem intrigue, let us now shift our focus to the moments when the quiet hum of daily life gave way to bursts of vibrant energy, the festivities and celebrations. The harem, though largely secluded, was not entirely devoid of joyous occasions. Births, circumcisions of princes, religious holidays, and royal weddings were all opportunities for elaborate celebrations that momentarily broke the routine, filling the inner palace with music, laughter, and dazzling displays. Imagine the atmosphere during a major imperial celebration, like the birth of a new prince. The entire harem would be abuzz with excitement. Courtyards would be adorned with colorful banners and lanterns. Musicians would play lively tunes, and dancers would perform intricate routines. The air would fill with the scent of special foods and sweets being prepared, and perhaps the faint pop of small fireworks in the distance, audible even within the harem walls. These were moments of collective joy and celebration, where the strict hierarchy might momentarily soften and a sense of shared community prevailed. It was like the most elaborate private block party you could imagine, but with sultans and eunuchs instead of neighbors. Religious holidays, such as Eid al-Fitr, marking the end of Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha, the Feast of Sacrifice, were also observed with great reverence and celebration. These occasions involved special prayers, charitable giving, and festive meals shared among the harem inhabitants. Imagine the women, dressed in their finest attire, exchanging greetings and sharing platters of specially prepared delicacies. These holidays provided a spiritual anchor and a communal sense of belonging, transcending the individual ambitions and rivalries. Royal weddings, especially those of the Sultan's daughters to powerful viziers or pashas, were grand affairs. While the main ceremonies took place outside the harem, a substantial portion of the festivities, particularly those involving the bride's preparation and farewells, occurred within its walls. Imagine the elaborate rituals, the bride adorned in layers of silk and jewels, her hands painted with intricate henna designs, surrounded by her female relatives and friends. Music would fill the air, and celebratory meals would be served, marking a significant transition for both the princess and the family. One quirky tidbit about harem celebrations was the inclusion of puppet shows and storytellers during these festive periods. While we touched on them as daily pastimes, during celebrations, professional performers might be brought in to entertain the harem's residents, offering more elaborate shows than usual. Imagine a skilled storyteller captivating the audience with epic tales of adventure and romance, or a troupe of musicians performing complex classical pieces. These artistic performances added a unique cultural dimension to the festivities, allowing the women to experience a taste of the vibrant Ottoman entertainment scene. Historians still argue whether these celebrations truly offered a temporary release from the harem's constraints or merely served to reinforce the existing power structures by providing carefully controlled outlets for enjoyment. While the women undoubtedly enjoyed these festive moments, the celebrations were always framed within the imperial context, designed to highlight the grandeur of the sultan and the prestige of the dynasty. They were meticulously planned events, not spontaneous outbursts of revelry. In The History of Sexuality, Michel Foucault argues that even festive and celebratory spaces can be sites where social norms and power relations are subtly reaffirmed. In the harem, these celebrations, despite their joyous nature, implicitly reinforced the imperial hierarchy and the sultan's absolute authority. The opulent display, the careful adherence to protocol, and the focus on dynastic milestones all serve to underscore the fundamental purpose of the harem as a site of imperial continuity. However, Webb's The Erotic Spirit Through History might suggest that the heightened sensory experiences of these celebrations, the vibrant colors, the rich foods, the intoxicating music, could also create an atmosphere of collective sensuality and heightened emotional connection, contributing to a feeling of shared pleasure and community, momentarily blurring strict lines of protocol through shared enjoyment. The shared laughter, the music, the perfume-laden air, all contributed to a unique, communal form of pleasure, a kind of collective intimacy. Even seemingly minor events, like the celebration of a child's first steps or the arrival of a rare and exotic gift for the sultan could become an excuse for smaller, more intimate gatherings within individual apartments. These micro-celebrations provided moments of personal joy and strengthened bonds between friends and family members within the harem. The echoes of laughter, the strains of joyous music, and the festive buzz would have provided a much-needed counterpoint to the more routine aspects of harem life. These celebrations were not just about pomp and circumstance. They were vital social and emotional outlets, allowing the women of the harem to experience moments of shared happiness, connection, and a deeper appreciation for the unique community they inhabited. You can almost feel the festive energy, a lively current that briefly animated every corner of the secluded palace. As the echoes of festive music fade, we now turn our gaze to the most precious and perhaps most vulnerable inhabitants of the harem, the children of the harem. These imperial offspring were the very future of the Ottoman dynasty, and their upbringing within the secluded walls of the palace was a matter of paramount importance, meticulously guided by tradition, ambition, and the watchful eyes of their mothers and guardians. Imagine the soft sounds of children's laughter echoing through courtyards, a delightful contrast to the usual adult whispers. The harem was not merely a residence for the sultan's consorts. It was a nursery, a school, and a playground for dozens of young princes and princesses. From the moment of their birth, these children were surrounded by an army of wet nurses, nannies, and tutors, all dedicated to their well-being and education. The care was comprehensive, ensuring they received the best of everything the empire could offer. The upbringing of a young prince, Shehzadeh, was particularly rigorous, given his potential future as sultan. His early years were spent almost entirely within the harem, under the watchful eye of his mother and the Valid Sultan. This close relationship fostered deep emotional bonds, but it also meant that a prince's early worldview was largely shaped by the women around him. He would learn basic literacy, religious studies, and palace etiquette, often alongside his sisters and the children of other harem inhabitants. It's like a very, very exclusive, high-pressure preschool, where the most important lesson is how to be a future emperor. Once a prince reached a certain age, typically around 12 to 14, he would gradually transition out of the immediate confines of the harem, moving into his own apartments within the palace, and beginning more intensive military and administrative training under male tutors. This transition was a significant rite of passage, marking his formal entry into the male world of politics and power. For his mother, this could be a moment of immense pride, but also anxiety as her influence over her son might diminish. The princesses, sultanicas, on the other hand, typically remained within the harem until their marriages. Their education, while still comprehensive, focused more on the arts, languages, and the skills necessary to manage a large household and fulfill their roles as imperial brides. As we've discussed, their marriages were often strategic alliances, cementing political ties across the empire. Imagine a young princess, perhaps practicing her calligraphy or playing a musical instrument, knowing that her future involved a meticulously arranged marriage to a powerful vizier, far from the familiar walls of her childhood. One quirky tidbit about the children of the harem involved the practice of cafes, cage, during later periods of the empire. This referred to a secluded section of the palace where potential heirs, brothers or nephews of the sultan, might be confined to prevent them from challenging the reigning monarch. While often portrayed as a dark prison, the conditions varied greatly, and some princes received education and lived in relative comfort, albeit without freedom. This drastic measure was a tragic way to prevent fratricide, a common and bloody feature of earlier Ottoman succession. It was the ultimate timeout for aspiring royalty. Historians still argue whether the close upbringing within the harem for young princes fostered strong, empathetic rulers, or if it sometimes led to sheltered individuals ill-prepared for the harsh realities of imperial politics. While the emotional security of the harem certainly provided comfort, the lack of extensive outside exposure could sometimes be a disadvantage when they eventually ascended to the throne. From Sex with Kings by Eleanor Herman, we understand the critical importance of legitimate succession in royal families and how the production of male heirs was paramount. The harem, in this sense, was the vital nursery for the dynasty, ensuring its continuity. The intense focus on the physical and educational well-being of the royal children directly reflects this imperial imperative. Furthermore, the book highlights how the mothers of these princes often wielded immense power through their sons, transforming their intimate role as mothers into a potent political force. The future of the empire literally rested in their hands, or more accurately, in the cradles they watched over. The nurturing and shaping of these young minds was not just an act of love, but a profound act of statecraft, ensuring that the legacy of the Ottoman Empire would endure through the generations of princes. The daily lives of the children within the harem would have been a blend of structured learning and playful moments. They would have had access to toys, games, and the companionship of other children, as well as the constant attention of their caregivers. The gardens and courtyards would have served as their playgrounds, providing safe, enclosed spaces for them to run and explore. You can almost hear the giggles and shouts of joy, a vibrant contrast to the often solemn adult world. The futures of these children were, of course, inextricably linked to the fortunes of the empire. Princes might ascend to the throne or spend their lives in comfortable confinement. Princesses would be married off to powerful figures, becoming influential women in their own right, but always serving the larger dynastic purpose. The harem, therefore, was not just a living space, but a crucible where the next generation of Ottoman leaders and their key allies were forged, literally within its secluded walls. As we near the conclusion of our journey through the Ottoman harem, it's important to consider a less common, yet equally fascinating aspect of its story, the escapes and afterlives of its inhabitants. While the harem was designed for permanent seclusion, not every woman remained within its walls for her entire life. For a select few, there were pathways, however rare and often challenging, that led back to the outside world, granting them an afterlife beyond the gilded cage. Imagine the sheer difficulty of such a transition. For most women, particularly those who had entered the harem at a young age, the outside world would have been entirely alien. They knew no other life, no other family, and possessed no practical skills for survival beyond the palace walls. Yet, some did find their way out, their fates varying dramatically from one individual to another. One of the most common ways a woman might leave the harem was through marriage. While the sultan's consorts generally remained within the harem, some courier who had not borne children or fallen out of favor might be married off to high-ranking officials, viziers, or pashas. This was often seen as a benevolent act by the sultan, a way to reward a loyal servant and ensure her future security. For these women, it meant transitioning from the imperial household to a powerful, aristocratic one. Imagine the bittersweet feelings, the joy of gaining a measure of freedom and perhaps a family of her own, mixed with the nostalgia for the familiar comforts and friendships of the harem. It's like graduating from the most exclusive boarding school, only your next step is a politically advantageous arranged marriage. Another, rarer path was released by the sultan's decree. Sometimes, a sultan might grant freedom to an older courier who had served faithfully for many years, allowing her to live out her days in quiet retirement, perhaps with a small pension. This was less common, as the harem system largely aimed for permanent retention, but it did occur. These women would often choose to live near the palace, maintaining some connection to the life they had known, or return to their families if they could locate them. The concept of escape in the dramatic sense, scaling walls or clandestine flights, was virtually impossible and incredibly rare due to the harem's stringent security and the pervasive network of eunuchs. However, escape could also be metaphorical, finding solace and agency within the system itself through intellectual pursuits, artistic expression, or cultivating personal power, as we've discussed. A quirky tidbit is the phenomenon of harem graduates contributing to society. Women who left the harem through marriage often brought with them the refined manners, education, and administrative skills acquired in the palace. Many became influential figures in their new households, managing vast estates, overseeing charitable foundations, and sometimes even subtly advising their powerful husbands on court matters. They carried a piece of the harem's sophistication into the wider Ottoman elite. It's like an incredibly exclusive alumni network where membership guaranteed a certain level of social and administrative prowess. Historians still argue whether the opportunities for leaving the harem represented genuine liberation or merely a transfer from one form of patriarchal control to another. While these women gained more personal autonomy, their lives were still largely dictated by their husbands' positions and societal expectations. Nevertheless, for many, it was a significant step towards a more conventional family life and a greater degree of personal choice. The History of Sexuality by Michel Foucault might suggest that even within systems of control, subjects find ways to exert agency and shape their own lives. For women leaving the harem, their afterlives were a testament to their resilience and adaptability. The experiences they gained in a uniquely structured, intimate environment prepared them for roles of management and influence in different contexts. The disciplined and refined existence within the harem, though restrictive, ironically provided many women with the very tools necessary to thrive in a life outside its immediate confines. They were educated, cultured, and accustomed to managing complex households, making them highly desirable wives for ambitious men. This transition wasn't just about finding a new home. It was about leveraging their unique harem education for social and economic advancement. Ultimately, while the image of the harem as a permanent, unbreakable golden cage holds some truth, it also obscures the nuanced realities of individual lives. For some, it was a lifelong home. For others, it was a formative, luxurious training ground that unexpectedly prepared them for new roles and futures in the vibrant, complex world of the Ottoman Empire. You can almost feel the quiet hopes and fears accompanying those rare departures, as women step from the familiar seclusion of the harem into the unknown expanse of an empire. As our long, gentle journey through the veiled corridors of the Ottoman harem draws to a close, we arrive at its enduring impact, its legacy and fading echoes. The harem, a place of immense power, subtle intrigue, lavish luxury, and intimate human drama, left an indelible mark on Ottoman history and continues to fascinate and confound us centuries later. It wasn't just a physical space. It was a powerful institution that shaped generations of sultans, influenced political decisions, and embodied a unique cultural ideal. Imagine the sheer longevity of this institution. For over 400 years, from the rise of the empire to its eventual decline, the harem remained a central pillar of the Ottoman imperial system. It adapted through changing eras, survived numerous political upheavals, and continued to function as the heart of the Sultan's private world and the nursery of the imperial dynasty. Its endurance is a testament to its fundamental utility within the Ottoman political and social framework. The harem's most direct legacy lies in its role in dynastic continuity. By housing and educating the mothers of future sultans, it ensured the perpetuation of the Ottoman line. The meticulous care of the imperial children, the grooming of potential heirs, and the careful management of succession were all core functions of the harem. Without this controlled environment, the stability of the imperial family, and thus the empire itself, would have been far more precarious. It was the ultimate long-term family planning strategy with empire-wide implications. Beyond dynastic matters, the harem also left a significant cultural legacy. It was a hub of artistic patronage, fostering talent in music, poetry, calligraphy, and fine crafts. The styles of clothing, the intricate culinary traditions, and even certain elements of interior design that flourished within the harem walls influenced broader Ottoman aesthetics. Imagine how the refined tastes cultivated in its secluded chambers eventually permeated the homes of the wealthy and powerful throughout the empire, setting trends in everything from fashion to garden design. One quirky tidbit about the harem's legacy is its enduring presence in folklore and popular imagination. Even as the institution faded, stories often exaggerated and romanticized continued to circulate. These tales, passed down through generations, shaped the popular perception of the harem in both the East and the West, creating a mystique that still captivates us today. From grand operas to whispered legends, the harem became a symbol of exoticism, intrigue, and hidden pleasure, though often far removed from its complex reality. It's like a historical urban legend that just keeps getting richer and more embellished with every telling. Historians still argue about the ultimate impact of the harem on the decline of the Ottoman Empire. Some argue that the increasing power of the Valid sultans and the secluded upbringing of princes in the Kafes system, which we touched on earlier, weakened the imperial administration, leading to a succession of less experienced or effective rulers. Others contend that these were merely symptoms of broader systemic issues, and that the harem itself was more a reflection of, rather than a cause of, imperial decline. The debate continues, painting a picture of an institution whose long-term effects are still being unraveled. Michel Foucault's broader arguments in the history of sexuality illuminate how institutions like the harem, by meticulously organizing and regulating intimacy, leave a profound mark on the societal understanding of sexuality itself. The harem's controlled environment, where pleasure was simultaneously cultivated and constrained, contributed to a specific Ottoman discourse on desire, modesty, and the sacredness of the imperial lineage. The very secrets it held, and the sophisticated ways in which they were managed, influenced perceptions of masculinity, femininity, and power within the broader culture. It codified certain intimate behaviors and expectations, ensuring they became part of the Ottoman consciousness long after the institution itself was gone. The echoes of these historical attitudes still resonate, subtle yet present, in modern interpretations of privacy and family. Ultimately, the harem, as a living entity, faded with the decline of the Ottoman Empire itself in the early 20th century. Its doors were finally closed, its residents dispersed, and its opulent chambers eventually converted into museum spaces, open to the public gaze that had been forbidden for centuries. Today, when you walk through the Topkapi Palace, you can visit the harem section, seeing its tiled walls, its courtyards, and its empty chambers. But to truly understand it, you must look beyond the physical remnants. You must listen for the fading echoes of soft whispers, distant music, the rustle of silk, and the silent footsteps of its inhabitants. It was a world of paradox, freedom within confinement, immense luxury alongside strict discipline, and profound human emotions playing out against a backdrop of imperial grandeur. It was a unique, often misunderstood chapter in history, a testament to the enduring human capacity for adaptation, ambition, and the creation of complex social structures. And as the last echoes of this extraordinary world gently recede, we are left with a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the lives lived within its golden cage. As the last words about the harem's enduring legacy drift into the quiet air, feel your awareness gently soften, much like the fading light over the Bosphorus at dusk. Allow the intricate details of mosaic tiles and silk whispers to dissolve into a comforting blur. There's no need to hold on to every fact or every name. Simply let the soft hum of history wash over you. The long journey through the Grand Palace is complete, and the weight of its complex stories can now lift from your mind. Feel your body sinking deeper into whatever surface holds you, warm and secure. The sounds of Langsun outside, the gentle hum of your fan, or the quiet solitude of your room, these are the anchors bringing you peacefully back to the present moment. Let your breath become slow, even, and untroubled. The secrets of the harem are now settled, like dust motes in a shaft of moonlight, and you too can settle into the deep quiet of the night. Sleep now, and may your dreams be as serene and rich as the untold stories of forgotten empires.